Fellow Ghanaians, a very good evening to all of you, and thank you very much for joining us here on Upfront on the Joy News channel. It's a Thursday, the 29th day of July 2021. And today, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, was in Parliament to present the mid-year budget review. And something happened. You know, many of the times the Finance Minister will get to Parliament in July and request additional funding. In effect, a supplementary budget. But that is not what happened in the 2021 mid-year budget review. The Finance Minister categorical, we're not here to ask for more money, we're not here to introduce new taxes. In fact, in years past, we've seen the introduction, for instance, of the luxury vehicle taxes, all in attempt to be able to generate revenue or raise more revenue for the country Ghana. According to the Finance Minister, this year is a year for tax compliance and enforcement. He believes that Ghana can actually meet its revenue target if Ghana ensures the compliance and enforcement of tax rules. But some of you have asked questions. You've asked, can we really do it? Particularly when we say we missed our revenue target by some 200 million Ghana cedis, because we anticipated about 26.1 billion in the first half of the year, only able to generate some 25.9 billion Ghana cedis. How about all the ambitious plans that we have? The second phase of Agenda 111 is expected to take off on the 17th of August 2021. What goes into the funding of this particular, very important agenda? 111 district and regional hospitals for the country Ghana. The last time I checked the budget for these hospitals, we're looking at a district hospital costing $15 million. We're looking at more than $1 billion. And if you look at the current exchange rate, you're looking at close to $6 billion. Can we find that money in the 2021 budget? These and many more issues trouble many of you, and it's got all of us having a conversation about the mid-year review. We've asked ourselves, well, there's a talk about 1 million jobs within the next 3 years. And we're expecting a collaboration between the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources and the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations, as well as the Ministry of Youth and Sports. But how different will this be from policies that we have seen in the past? After all, we have the Youth Employment Agency, the National Youth Authority. One would expect that these are the institutions to do so. What would the 1 million jobs over the next 3 years entail, particularly when we still have a target of 1.5 million jobs or 1.5 million farmers when it comes to planting for food and jobs? Not a departure from the 2020 figure. And that will be the first time you'd have the same number of farmers targeted since the start of the program in 2017. My name is Winston Amwa, and thank you very much for joining us this evening on Upfront on the Joy News channel. When I return after these few messages, I'll be introducing my guest to you, and also we'll be sharing with him what the things the Finance Minister said in Parliament today, and then we get into the conversation about what this mid-year budget review means for our dearest economy, Ghana. All right, so welcome back, and thank you very much for staying with us. We'd love to know what your thoughts are, because this particular presentation was done for you to let you understand where we are as a country based on the budget that we presented in March 2021 for the remainder of the year, or for the 2021 fiscal year. The Finance Minister has been in Parliament. He's been telling us what we have been doing, the fact that the country grew by 3.1% in the first quarter of 2021. And very soon we'll be joined by Dr. Kojopoku, who is a development economist and research fellow at the Center for Social Policy Studies at the University of Ghana. He'll be joining us shortly. But first, let's get to Parliament and hear what the Finance Minister said concerning government social support, on youth employment, and how it intends to create 1 million jobs.
As part of measures to mitigate the impact of unanticipated future socioeconomic crises such as COVID-19 pandemic on Ghanaian workers, government announced in the 2020 mid-year review of fiscal policy the establishment of the National Unemployment Insurance Scheme and training-retraining programs as part of the Ghana Cares Over Tampa program. Mr. Speaker, we are currently in the design phase of the National Unemployment Scheme, and key stakeholders are being consulted the consultations will be scaled up to include more stakeholders and technical experts to ensure that the project design suits the Ghanaian labor market. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the training and retraining component of the program has been accelerated. Government, together with the social partners, have decided to pilot the national training and retraining program in the two sectors that were mostly affected by the pandemic, namely the private education sector and the hospitality and tourism sector. The compacts which have been signed between the Ministries of Finance and a number of MDAs specify specific results to be achieved by the MDAs and the catalytic resources to be provided by the Ministry of Finance. Each compact includes a clear results tracking framework with further releases of funds tied to performance. I'm happy to report that this exciting performance-based arrangement is up and running. The catalytic resources have started flowing and the MDAs are energized and getting on with the activities. The compacts ensure effective and timely delivery of targets under Ghana Cares for 2021. Mr. Speaker, government is demonstrably committed to the nation's economic recovery and eventual transformation as envisioned by the Ghana Cares program. We are innovating new ways to get results. We are engaging all actors to secure keen participation and involvement. We are aggressively mobilizing resources to deliver the program. The recent urgency brought to bear by our youth is appreciated. We will continue to prioritize the opportunities as a means for this transformation journey. Mr. Speaker, despite the generally strong performance of our economy in recent decades, the issue of unemployment and jobs for our youth, who constitute close to 71% of our population, persists. This situation has been exacerbated by the pandemic, by the impact of this pandemic. Taking the lesson from our recent past, we are deliberately intervening to avoid a jobless economic growth and recovery. Mr. Speaker, at a strategic level, our comprehensive and holistic response to the employment and jobs issue remains anchored on the private sector. It is for this reason that government's recovery program transformation agenda is easing the constraints of the private sector to enable them to expand and provide jobs for the youth. A recent survey indicated that about 50% of local employers report misalignment of or inadequacy of skills in the market. It also reports that at least 50% of new tertiary institutions entrants are enrolling in programs in sectors with no or little growth in labor market. Mr. Speaker, in response to this, we are strengthening the links between education and job market stakeholders. We are also revitalizing the skills development initiatives and the Ghana Enterprises Agency, NEIP, YEA, and CODVET. We are also feverishly working on a scheme that enables the private sector to train new recruits entrants at a subsidized rates by government. Mr. Speaker, our intention of building an entrepreneurial nation is already known. We aim to empower our youth to be at ease and venture into businesses. The cleanup of the financial sector and the invigoration of the entrepreneurial ecosystem is expected to help remove the binding constraints of financing and market linkages for our daring youth. Our focus will remain on establishing a strong value system for entrepreneurship to flourish. Mr. Speaker, recognizing that more needs to be done, government is today announcing a 1 million jobs initiatives to aggressively respond to the needs of the country. This is to promote growth in SMEs, support new ventures, and stimulate innovation and startups. Mr. Speaker, to sustain the quality of life for Ghanaians during the pandemic, government subsidized the cost for various categories of household and industrial electricity consumption from April to December 2020. Altogether, 4,772,512 customers benefited from the electricity reliefs for the period. The policy, however, continued for lifetime customers from January to March 2021. Mr. Speaker, as part of government's social interventions for supply of free water under the COVID-19 initiative, the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources partnered the Ghana Water Company Limited and Community Water and Sanitation Agency to ensure the full realization of the objective. The program started in April 2020 and was extended to June 2021 for domestic consumers whose monthly consumption does not exceed 5,000 liters. In all, over 10 million urban dwellers were supplied with potable water by Ghana Water from April to December 2020. This initiative currently supplies free water to a total of about 2.3 million urban domestic dwellers whose monthly consumption does not exceed 5,000 liters of potable water at a cumulative cost of 836.82 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, CWSA, on the other hand, supplied 17.9 billion liters of potable water to rural and peri-urban population of 5.8 million at a total cost of 100.28 million Ghana cedis between April 2020 and June 2021.
So that was Ken Ofori-Atta talking about an agenda to create jobs, the fact that government intends to assist the private sector, ensure that many of the young ones who do not have jobs get jobs, 1 million jobs in 3 years. Let's also get to issues to do with COVID-19. He's been talking about the COVID-19, public sector trust fund, and how they spent the money, and also a vaccination drive.
Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 National Trust Fund was set up under Act 1013 to receive and manage contributions and donations from well-meaning individuals, groups, and corporate bodies. As at 30th June 2021, the COVID-19 National Trust Fund had received a total amount of 57.15 million in cash donations. These donations were made between the period April 2020 and March 2021. As at 30th June 2021, the fund had disbursed an amount of 52.5 million Ghana cedis for various programs as well as procurement of items. Mr. Speaker, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, government has developed and implemented a number of interventions expressed in the National COVID-19 Emergency Preparedness and Response Plan and the National Strategic COVID-19 Response Plan, July 2020 to December 2024. Mr. Speaker, these plans and related interventions provided a comprehensive framework to mobilize and disburse funds which have proved vital to the success of the national containment and case management measures. Since Ghana recorded its first 2 cases on 12 March 2020, the Ghana Health Service has conducted 1,416,952 tests as of 25th July 2021, with a cumulative positivity rate of 7.3%. Mr. Speaker, Ghana implemented the COVID-19 vaccination campaign as part of the containment strategy and has developed the National Deployment and Vaccination Plan. It is planned that 20 million Ghanaians will be vaccinated in order to achieve herd immunity. Mr. Speaker, we have upgraded our national, regional, and district cold chain facilities to widen our access to vaccines like Pfizer and Moderna that require -70 degrees centigrade cold chains. These include 16 ultra-low cold freezers, 58 units of ultra-low freezers, 50 normal vaccine refrigerators, 300 boxes to be filled with ice packs, 300 ice-packed freezers, 10 cold chain vans, and 120 temperature monitoring devices. Government has also committed to providing seed funding of $25 million towards the development of the country's capacity to produce vaccines domestically. This will be achieved through the establishment of a National Vaccine Institute.
Right, so that was Ken Ofori-Atta talking about our vaccination drive, talking about how we've spended monies that were generated through the COVID-19 Trust Fund. Let's look at housing. Then we get in studio. We'll be joined by Dr. Kwadwo Poku. We have a very exciting conversation because, yes, we do know that the finance minister says this time around, no supplementary budget, not asking for any additional funding, neither is he introducing any new taxes. Let's listen to what he has to say concerning housing.
Support of government's agenda to provide sustainable and completed affordable housing, we are providing funds to the National Home Ownership Fund. This fund to be matched by participating financial institutions will provide low blended mortgage interest rates of between 11 to 12% as compared to the current market rates between 25 to 26%. Through this intervention, which builds upon and expands the pilot project implemented last year, our quest to promote residential home ownership while boosting the domestic construction sector to provide more jobs is on course.
So there's a plan to boost domestic construction, provide more jobs, and also assist persons to be able to acquire mortgages at a reduced interest rate. The minister talks about having 11% interest when it comes to the acquisition of mortgages. Final one is the National Cathedral. Lots of talk about it. There's a plan. Listen to the Finance Minister.
Following the program of the contractors, and with God helping us, the National Cathedral is expected to be officially commissioned on March 6, 2024. Upon completion, the National Cathedral will provide a sacred space for formal religious activities of state and symbolize the enormous contribution of faith to nation building. Mr. Speaker, this state and church partnership envisaged by the President to develop the National Cathedral is on course. An initiative, the 100 Cedis a Month Club, also dubbed Ketua Biara Nswa, will be launched by the trustees of the National Cathedral on August 12, 2021, to give as many Ghanaians as possible the opportunity to be part of the history to build the National Cathedral. The aim of the club is to raise 1 million Ghanaians who will give a member of this august house joining the 100 Cedis a Month Club.
Well, so that's the Finance Minister that talk about Ketua Biara Nswa. And so for all of you who, according to the Finance Minister, would want to contribute towards the construction of the National Cathedral expected to be launched on 6th March 2024, you know what to do. But let's get into the conversation now. And Dr. Kojo-Poku, who is a research fellow at the Center for Social Policy Studies, University of Ghana, also a development economist, has joined us. Dr. Kojo-Poku, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. Hello, Dr. Kojo-Poku, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. Maybe you should unmute your microphone so you can hear us.
Thank you very much, and good viewers and listeners.
I seem to have a bit of a feedback. I don't know, but if you have your TV close by, maybe if you could turn it off for us. Yes. So let's look at it. What were your expectations, and were your expectations met? Were you expecting a supplementary budget? Were you shocked by the decision not to have a supplementary budget?
No, please. I actually expected that the government will not introduce any new tax or expenditure. Looking at the atmosphere, the debt situation, and also is not in a short term. It's difficult to raise revenues. So, given all these conditions, I actually expected that there won't be any change, and also given that this budget was just prepared in this March, so virtually it's just about 4 months old. So I thought that it is in the right order to maintain this budget.
Yeah. So, but the problem is, or the challenge here is the fact that we know that we could not meet our revenue target for the first half of the year. Now our expenditure remains the same. Can we meet that target? And if we can't meet that target, wouldn't it be appropriate for us to be looking at additional means of spending?
Yes, so that's true. As you know, once they cannot increase, it's not easy to increase tax, and they didn't achieve the target. So it's very difficult now for any finance minister during the period that we find ourselves. Because one, you don't want to incur a lot of debt, so you want to reduce your deficit, or the rate of increase of deficit, you want to reduce it. And also, we are in a recovery stage, so you also want to improve expenditure in order to speed up recovery. So it's very tough for any the finance minister or the government, but since taxes are not easy to increase in the short term, they have to. And as you said already, they couldn't achieve the first 6 months. They couldn't achieve their revenue target. That tells you that their deficit, the budgeted deficits already, they cannot achieve the budget deficit. So there's no need for them to bring out new expenditure track because they cannot finance that expenditure. So I think it's right, or that though they know that it's very difficult for them, especially to back up the recovery that they want.
We're talking about expenditure. I mean, we're looking at Agenda 111. Yes, it was in the 2021 budget, but that particular expenditure item is where the challenge is. And I mean, looking at the budget, I've been looking at the appendixes, and you only see on page 252 of the budget the fact that government intends to borrow to engage in the construction of Agenda 111. That's 111 hospitals. If you look at those appendices critically, you see that there isn't a provision for in excess of 6 billion Ghana cedis to construct these facilities. So the question is, where is this going to come from?
So I don't know how you checked, but of course the budget, they might not have stated it explicitly that this is what they are going to do. And the budget, the building Agenda 111, that number of hospitals is not just for one single year budget. So definitely in 2020, they will do some part of it, which they might have budgeted for.
Dr. Kojopoku,
they also have part of it.
Dr. Kojopoku,
they can't construct it within that period. So
the president was very categorical. In April 2020, when the president first made this promise, he talked about the hospitals commencing and being completed in 1 year. Yes, if they start, it is expected that it's completed in 2022. So part of it will get into the 2022 budget. But you look at it and ask yourself, how much of that will be funded in the 2021 budget? How much of that will be funded in the 2022 budget? Now, the COVID-19 health levy, which was imposed this year, was supposed to take care of some of these things. If you look at that particular tax, according to the budget, it is expected to generate some 889 million Ghana cedis in 2021 and about 1.2 billion Ghana cedis in 2022. That also, if you look at it critically, goes up to 2023. Clearly, if we're to consider that the hospitals promised that were going to be built in a year, you would say that cannot happen?
So I think for the hospitals, definitely if they start, as you agree to it, they cannot conclude, or cannot finish all the hospitals for this year. And so they can also finance it by loans. Of course, when the money gets into the consolidated fund, you can, once they have planned for it, and I've not actually checked from the budget if they did not plan for it, but I believe that they might have stated amount, which probably, as you said, it's not only COVID-19 levy. They might use other resources that might be available to government to finish that part that they need conclude to expend on this hospital for this year. Then from next year, they can plan the amount that they want to spend on it. So I don't think that since they have calculated, they stated that they were going to finish it in 2021, they couldn't do that. But of course, they realized that there were no funds. So definitely they may have shifted their stance, and given the condition, the debt overhang and all those, what is happening in Ghana right now, they might have projected that no, we might not be able to finish. So we need to change the trajectory. So probably that is what they are doing right now. And I believe that they will not spend too much on it this year, but subsequent years, they might be able to find money to finance this project.
Let's look at another important factor, because we're being told that if care is not taken, we could be faced with a third wave of COVID-19. We saw what COVID-19 did to us in 2020 and its impact even going into 2021. Now, we know that movement will drive consumption, consumption will drive growth. If we hit a third wave, that automatically affects consumption, affects movement, and that would affect consumption. Do you see that this budget anticipates that and has plans to deal with it?
I don't see that. I don't see that in the budget. But here is the problem for the entire country. We don't want to pay tax, and you also don't want the government to borrow. So in this situation, I think the government and the central bank should sit down, plan towards it, and any emergency like that, when it happens like that, the government should be able to take something from the central bank to help them to be able to cover those things that may come. Even now, without even third wave, I still believe that we should not think too much about our debt situation as the government is thinking. I think the government has taken a lot of the sentiments of the public into consideration. I think we still, because if you look at the budget, in fact, primary balance is still surplus for 2021, which means that we are not doing expansionary fiscal budget. And I believe we should be thinking of...
Primary balance is a deficit of 1.7 billion.
Excuse me?
Primary balance is a deficit of 1.7 billion.
No, primary balance, domestic primary, that is when you consider the grant. And you know, grants are not, you can't plan with grants. So if you take grant out and you consider only domestic primary balance, you realize that they have planned for 1.9% of GDP, which is surplus. And it is pure expansion, because that means that when you take interest payments from government expenditure, you realize that government is actually not doing expansion or not spending too much. Most of the spending are going to the interest payment and debt servicing. So when you take that out, you see that government is actually making a surplus, and that is what happened in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Only 2020 that they made primary balance deficit. So I think that's plan. They should reconsider it, because they are not making plan. That plan do not suit well for our recovery, given that the consumption, we should boost our economy during this period.
So if you look at, and I'm looking at what the minister read in Parliament, paragraph 22, page 5, he says, Mr. Speaker, we are managing the finances of the country with discipline and competence. The fiscal operations from the period of January to June 2022 indicate the overall budget deficit was 22.32 billion, equivalent to 5.1% of GDP. The corresponding primary balance for the period was a deficit of 7.3 billion, which is equivalent to 1.7% of GDP against a target of 4.7 billion or 1.1% of GDP. Dr. Poku. So this...
That is...
yes,
that is primary balance?
Yes.
Yes, but I was talking about domestic primary balance. That one that you quoted include grants. Mm-hmm. So I was stating the domestic primary balance.
Okay. Yes. So yes, let's come to the point. I mean, you've made a point about, and we'll come back to this shortly. But you made a point about borrowing or debt, and the fact that we should not be concerned about debt so much. Why shouldn't we be concerned when the ability to pay is very key?
Excuse me, come again.
I'm asking you, why shouldn't you be concerned about the debt currently when our ability to pay these debts is very important? And if you get to unsustainable limits, it would hurt you and hurt the populace.
Yes, so that is that's what I said. We are in a very difficult situation now with the entire people and even the managers of the economy, because you are also considering how you can service your debt. But as we all know, we are in a very difficult situation, and the economy need to, when you take the interest rate, I mean, when your entire revenue, I mean, when your entire revenue is about 65 billion or so last year, and this year we are thinking about 75 or so, and debt servicing, that is interest payment and interest rate, is about 50 billion. That is, we have not even considered wages and salary. So when you consider all these things, then you see that for short term, it is very difficult to think too much about deficit or increasing debt, and especially when you want to recover and when you also want to give employment to people. But rather, we should look for borrowing from sources that we can have a little bit concessional, not borrowing where the interest rate is too high. Like when you go to the Euro bonds market, where you are going to consider depreciation and also the interest rate. But when you're able to get loans from the central bank, if the central bank accommodates you, then you're able to get rate at least a cheaper rate than the debt servicing, or when they also give it in a long-term basis, where the moratorium will be a little bit higher, maybe 5 years or later before you can pay, so that you could give some space to the government. Right now, there's no fiscal space available to the government.
Exactly, but the point also is that when the central bank would give you, we've passed laws that says you don't go beyond 10% of domestic revenue. And the point you make here, I mean, let's look at it critically. The point you make here is that if government decides to go for debt outside the country, or let's say even it decides to go for debt within the country, the government is talking about the need to have the private sector grow. So the banks would have to lend to the private sector in order to ensure that these entities are able to grow. Now, if the government is borrowing within, I mean, one of the most the non-riskiest clients a bank would ever borrow to, lend to is the government. What that would mean is that you're going to be denying the private sector the funding they need to develop. If your debt is also going up and you'd have to go outside borrowing, once you become a debt-distressed country, entities will begin to lend you money at higher interest rates. Clearly, the decision to borrow more would just not augur well for us, you would agree, Dr. Poku.
That's true. That's why I'm talking about the central bank. Of course, the central bank is the lender of last resort to the government. And also, do you ask yourself, why is it that IMF and World Bank are able to give concessional loans to most government when they are in distress? Why can't the central bank or Bank of Ghana do the same thing? They can also do the same thing by having a program with the government, maybe 5-year program, where they are going to help the government. And you know, when we borrow from outside, as you say, that the risk is that debt risk is very high, the risk premium is very high, and therefore you pay higher interest rate. And when you borrow from the commercial bank also, they're crowding out, and you want to avoid that. And the only risk with respect to borrowing from the central bank is with respect to inflation. And now, luckily for us, we are at a stage where we have about inflation rate is about 7.5 or so. And if we have a low inflation rate like that, and probably we have even come down from the optima. Of course, we don't know optima, but if you look at the literature, you see that even India, their optimal rate of inflation is about 6%. So it means that ours may be a little bit higher. So if we are below our optimal rate, then we have a leeway for the central bank to at least lend to the government in this period where it is very critical. And I don't expect it to, the amount that they will give to government to just raise inflation to a very high level, given that we are lucky enough, we are having this inflationary period. Great.
So you're looking at government having to borrow more. You think that the central bank should be the lender of last resort because yes, all the other factors would not inure to government's benefit. Government has decided otherwise. You have a challenge with that?
Excuse me?
Government has decided otherwise. Government has decided we do not want to borrow. We just want to stick to the plan. Of course, if we do not hit the revenue targets that we anticipate, it means we'd have to go and look for additional revenue. And that would mean we have to borrow more. That's something government cannot run away from. But that's what they talk about, you know, the tax compliance and enforcement. Now, does that bring you any hope? Bearing in mind also that this will not be the first time we're talking about this.
Yes, so for tax compliance, I think they are doing well with regards to the ID system and what is going on right now, what is going on with GRA, but I don't expect it to increase tax revenues that are enough to expand the economy. Probably, and we are also afraid, as we couldn't even increase tax or even progressive tax. We can't do it for now. So I don't expect it to increase tax revenue. And basically, that's it. I don't expect the tax revenue to increase so that they will get enough revenue, extra revenues to expand the economy. So the result is that if they are not able to borrow, if they are not ready to borrow, and they are not also able to raise revenues for some expansionary expenditures, then our recovery will be delayed. We will not be able to recover as we want. And the employment that we want to create, we may not be able to achieve those targets.
We'll get to the employment shortly. But the other question is, why the haste? I mean, the likes of Professor Noah Tego, the distinguished professor at Nottingham University who, has developed the SEMA model, has talked about us in a haste. He says, hasten slowly in your path to recovery. Why the haste? Why are we in a hurry to recover so quickly?
Yes, so if you don't do things well and you delay it, of course, your people are suffering. I mean, people are not having jobs, and the GDP is not increasing at the rate that you want. So you delayed your growth, you delayed employment, and your tax, it also affects your tax that will come, the tax capacity, that will, the amount that you can raise. So definitely, if you need to do at this period, that is why for developed countries, because they had the leeway, they had to do whatever it takes them to prepare the economy when they are at the distress. So you don't wait before the economy is doing well, or when you definitely have difficulty in reducing inflation. At the period where the economy, the inflation is high, you cannot do that. But this period where we all know that the things are not going on well, then you have a leeway that the central bank can help so that you will be able to increase GDP without compromising so much on your inflation target.
Let's look at the issue of jobs. And this will not be the first time we're talking about jobs. I mean, consistently, there's been an agenda for job creation, budget, and everything. I mean, we've talked about the Jumapa budget. Now, if you look at this, we're talking about 1 million jobs in 3 years. And it looks like the same thing. Skills training, alternative employment, small skill mining for sustainable jobs. Should the government consistently be in the business of having to run these training models, all aimed at creating jobs which, in most of the cases, just do not get to the right persons?
I've not read the supplementary budget that was read now. I don't think the government is saying that the government itself is going to employ going to employ 1 million people on government or state-owned enterprises. I believe they may support the private sector. You can provide subsidy for the private sector to generate more employment. I believe something like that, but otherwise, I don't think within the 3 years,
the government talks about a skills training. So this is the point. And when the president talks about, a government announcing its intention to create 1 million jobs in the next 3 years, and it tasked the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations, Lands and Natural Resources, and Youth and Sports to actually lead this charge. Of course, they would liaise with the private sector, but he's talked about using, the agencies, Youth Employment Agency, National Youth Authority. And the question is, this has always been the channel. We're talking about skills training. This has always been the channel. We have the National Entrepreneurial and Innovation Plan. This has always been the channel. I mean, isn't it about time we sat back and said, let us look at how all these things have run? We've run a National Entrepreneurial and Innovation Plan for a very long time now. What's been the impact of this particular scheme, rather than continuously churning out numbers and saying, this is what we intend to do?
Yes, I agree with you on this call. I don't think the government should be so much involved in employing people through its agencies or other things, but rather should provide a safe way for the private sector to employ people. For government, you cannot continue to do that. Even if you start, you cannot continue. And given here, we come back to the budget again. You don't have the resources to do that, because when you employ them, you need to pay them. and you don't have enough resources to do that, to do the infrastructure and all those things. So if you commit yourself to employ 1 million people, I don't know if it is through these agencies, but not through private sector, then I don't think
well, some are going to be trained. Some are going to be trained. And so once they're trained, it is expected that after training, they would get employment elsewhere. They become their own employers, because we're talking about giving them skills training for entrepreneurial development. And so not just having to create the, but the question is, we've been doing this for some time now. Entrepreneurship should be what someone feels I want to do. But it looks like we're looking for persons and we are saying, come, let us give you the training and you become an entrepreneur. My question is, shouldn't government look at, specifically, we have a government cares program, that's the coronavirus, alleviation, revitalization enterprise support scheme. Why don't we channel lots of these there? Why don't we ensure that we're able to help these persons to be able to raise enough revenue, or these entities raise enough revenue, and they're able to deal with them?
Yes, so the government, of course, if they are able to help the existing companies or existing firms, they improve them and they will be able to employ them. But also, we also know that the youth also need employment, and if at early stage, you are able to help them build their capacity with regards to entrepreneurial skills, and they are able to step out with their youthful exuberance. If they are able to step out, they may be ready to take more risks.
Hello, Doc. Hello, Doc. Well, I think we've lost Dr. Kojo-Poku, who is a research fellow at Center for Social Policy Studies at the University of Ghana. We'll go for some few messages. This is UpFront on the Joy News Channel. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Right, so welcome back, and thank you very much for staying with us here on UpFront on the Joy News Channel, where this evening we're focusing on, the 2021 mid-year budget review. Now, the finance minister has been in Parliament, and he's been talking about what he sought to achieve in 2021, and he's been reporting on what he has achieved so far. 3.1% growth in the first half of the year. The target is to achieve 5%, and he's also been telling us what they intend to do. Agenda 111 starts on the 17th of August. But let's focus on the Ghana Cares Program, Coronavirus Alleviation Revitalization Enterprise Support Scheme. And we have, Dr. Kojo-Poku, who is a research fellow at the Center for Social Policy Studies at the University of Ghana, still with us. So let me get back to you on this, Dr. Kojo-Poku. So let's look at the support to the private sector. Last year was the launch of the 100 billion Ghana cedis Coronavirus Alleviation and Revitalization Enterprise Support Scheme, Ghana Cares Program, tagged Obatampa. Of course, we had also initiated the CAP bars and all of that. Let's look at these programs and how they can help in our path to recovery.
Thank you. So on the surface, if you look at those programs, as was captured in the budget, it was a good program, and if we were to implement them well, they could be able to help us to recover very fast. But apart from what I read in the budget, I couldn't see any manual or any document that detailed how that program is supposed to be run. And remember, it was multi-year program, not only a single year program. So if we were able to do it well, helping the medium, small scale and medium scale enterprises, if we're able to do that, then definitely we finance them, you give them soft loans with a lower interest rate, that was definitely going to help them to produce. And once they are producing, definitely they'll also be able to employ it, and that will actually help us to recover. But we couldn't see detail in terms of how the program was going to be implemented, especially apart from last year. This year, we don't know what is going on, and we don't have any policy document that shows how the program is going to be implemented for the years going ahead.
Well, I've seen a policy document when it comes to the Ghana Cares program of Atanpa, but when it comes to
all right, that's good.
Yes, I've seen that. When it comes to the CABAS, the Coronavirus Alleviation Program Business Support Scheme. Now, close to 1 billion Ghana cedis is expected to be distributed to businesses. About 277,000 of them are beneficiaries already. But we have not been able to distribute all of it. The question is, and for many of these entities, they say the monies you give us are too small to push us, and thus just doesn't do anything. Now, as we're about wrapping up, going forward, should government consider increasing funds given to these entities so it could meaningfully impact their business, or continue with these little funds?
So I think what happened last year was more of redistributed in nature. I think going forward, select few of them that have the capacity and they have capacity to be more productive. Select those few of them and give them enough of that money. I mean, instead of spreading it across to a lot of people, enterprises, rather select few of them that have the capacity and give them that resources. When they are able to improve, then you can move away from them. Then you go to other enterprises that can also improve, and you give them that money. But if you spread it like that and very tiny amount of money, it's very difficult for them to make anything out of that small amount of money. They will not be able to increase their productivity, and therefore will not generate the impact that you want.
Yeah, but talking about that, I mean, if that was just redistributive. Now, the point at the time was to support these entities. Now, if I am faced with a challenge and you're supporting me in a way that I could get onto my feet. So if you give me little money, it's more like we're interested in the number of entities we have supported and not the ability to get these entities to work, because there were entities that needed money, they applied and did not get anything. So clearly, this is a case of, isn't this looking like a case of we need to spread it wide and thin and have the numbers?
So it's easy to say that. Of course, before then, many of these entities, they were not known by the government. So government did not have information about these entities. So you don't know their level, how much they produce and those things. So it was very difficult for them. So I don't know, probably they should have done impact evaluation even for now, after giving that money to them for last year. By now they should have done impact evaluation, and they will know, if they do the impact evaluation, they will know the kind of firms that were helped by those amounts and those that did not help. So that going forward, it shouldn't be like you spread it, as I said before, it shouldn't be like you spread it to cover many enterprises, but rather make sure that you target those ones that have the capacity to increase employment, that has the capacity to be more productive, so that you can generate the needed growth that you actually desire. That's what I think way forward the government should do.
Dr. Kojo Poku, thank you very, very much for joining us. We're very grateful. Dr. Kojo Poku is a research fellow at the Center for Social Policy Studies at the University of Ghana. That'll be all from us this evening on Upfront on the Joy News channel. My name is Winston Amoa. Tomorrow on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7. Of course, the discussions on the media budget review would continue. Have a lovely evening. Up next is Joy News Prime.